This podcast is made possible by VersaPay.
Hi, this is Anisha Sood, CFO and Chief Strategy Officer of First Choice Health, and you are listening to the CFO Thought Leader Podcast.
This is episode 886.
We have a path to profitability, and so I'm continuing to maintain that path while ensuring we're capturing all the growth that's out there, and continuing to keep an eye on that mix is, for me, the number one goal. And then I would also add to that is that, continuing to ensure that not only does our TAM grow, but that we can maintain our competitive positioning. Because, the one thing about success is, when you become a successful company is that you do have a lot of entrants. And that's especially in the environment of a lot of what people are calling essentially free money. But just really keeping an eye on that, because I think as we've seen in the last couple months, things just move really, really fast.
Hi, it's Jack. On this episode, we speak with Alka Tandan, CFO of Gainsight. One key takeaway from CFO Alka Tandan's career journey is the importance of being open to new opportunities and pivoting when necessary. Tandan started in investment banking, transitioned to media, and then pivoted to the SaaS industry. Along the way, few career chapters have been as fortuitous for Tandan, perhaps, as the one she opened in 2019 when she joined SaaS developer Gainsight as VP of Finance. 18 months later, Vista Equity Partners acquired Gainsight for $1.5 billion, and only 90 days later, Tandan was named interim CFO. The interim role became Alka Tandan's door opener for the CFO office. We will speak to CFO Alka Tandan about her career journey and much more after this. When your accounts receivable automation focuses only on back office tasks, you forget the most important stakeholder, your customers. VersaPay gives you all the tools you need to automate those tasks, plus the collaboration tools to take on everything that automation alone simply can't. This doesn't just increase efficiencies and accelerate cash flow, but also creates a dramatically improved experience for your customers. And as the economy tightens, can you really afford to risk losing customers over an invoice-to-cash process they find frustrating? With VersaPay, clients typically achieve 50% less time managing receivables, 25% faster payments, 30% fewer past due invoices, and 81% customer portal adoption. Learn more about VersaPay's collaborative AR, ERP payments, and cash application solutions at versapay.com/CFO. So I begin by saying, hello, we're speaking to Alka Tandan, CFO of Gainsight. Alka, welcome.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. I've been a fan of your podcast, and so it's a thrill for me.
Well, that's nice to hear. For our listeners, just to mention, Alka stepped into the CFO office for the first time last year after having climbed through several different senior positions at Gainsight. We've been looking forward to asking her to take a look back for us and identify some of those places in time where she feels she received the experience to develop as a leader. What comes to mind for you, Alka?
So I think, very early in my career, especially at those days, there were really two good avenues for finance people. One was consulting, one was investment banking. I decided to go investment banking, and I was working at mostly boutique firms. But I think when you're in sort of an analyst program like that, you get very wide exposure to lots of different companies, lots of different technologies. You also get a lot of executive exposure when when both companies are often at, making some very large strategic decisions and bets. So I definitely think that that exposure at a young age and going through a program like that, I think really, really helps. And especially if you end up going into a career, I think it helps in a variety of different careers. But I think definitely as a CFO, it's interesting. It still comes up. It still comes up, when I sort of talk about my career or my career path, even with investors. And so I think there's something about the rigor of a program like that people really appreciate also. And then I think the second thing is right. After business school, I ended up basically working at a company called IGN. It was at that time a division of News Corp, but we really ran independently. It was their new media division. But I came in when they were separating from their finance organization from from News Corp proper. And so it was the opportunity to build the finance function from the ground up, which we did. And then we did a lot there. So we did 6 M&A transactions at the end. We ended up selling ourselves. And they were all really, really different. Some were a divestiture. So another time we actually bought a company. So I think, and then we also built out the business partnership function in addition to just doing the pure finance piece. So I often call that time in my life my real MBA, because we basically built everything from scratch. We also had the business had around 4 different business models. And so I think if anyone can get into a company like that where it's learning so much. I mean, I just condensed so much in 4.5 years. And so I would say, and I'm still friends with the CEO. He runs Bloomberg Beta now, Roy Bahat. And so I would say that was pretty foundational as well.
When you look back at your IGN years, and I'll point out to listeners that you made an investment of 4.5 years there. Do you recall sort of raising your hand when there was a particular M&A deal or some FP&A brain knowledge that needed to be applied? I'd like to be on that team, whatever it may have been. Anything come to mind?
Well, luckily we proved ourselves pretty early. So for the CEO, we were essentially the M&A team. He did sort of like the high level, like, okay, this is what we're going to buy, or this is what we're going to divest. And FP&A team, we sort of need you to we come in. So the big analysis we would do, of course, is sort of what does this company look like as a combined entity? The second biggest was what synergies are we going to be able to get as a combined entity? So in most M&A transactions, often, at the G&A line, you will see a lot of synergies where you don't really often need 2 G&A teams. But I think the more important synergies are even in like sales and marketing. How many salespeople do we need? Do we really need specialized salespeople? And so being able to really see where you can extract value from M&A is important. And that really also requires an incredible cross collaboration. So the FP&A team already having strong business partnership, with already having those good relationships, being able to go and have those honest conversations. And, I think that's where a lot of the art also comes in, because you've got a head of a group, let's say, sales or marketing, and they're going to have to combine these teams, and they don't really want to give up much in the beginning. And as FP&A, our role is, first of all, to have that trust where you can have these open conversations, but also the business really, really well. So you can challenge them a bit more versus someone just kind of coming in cold. So I would say those are the 2 big pieces. And then actually afterwards, we ended up actually doing a fair amount of the integration work as well, at least leading it. And so that means we've got our financial model. We've been having these discussions around strategy as well and extracting synergies. Now, FP&A, actually, we want you to actually just, usually it's one person, just actually go and own it and make sure all these items actually happen along with the business. So I would sort of look at it in those 3 buckets.
Ask you mentioned, of course, that you were in investment banking very early in your career, and you jumped into industry pretty quickly. When you came out of business school, were you headed to industry? Was there some decision you made? I want industry, not necessarily investment banking.
Yeah, I did. Investment banking is amazing because it gives you incredible exposure in terms of wide range of industries, wide range of business models, as well as just executive exposure. But for me, I really made a decision after spending about almost 5 years in investment banking that I really wanted to be in a company's journey and really build value, and that was just more interesting, for me. So I kind of used business school as a way to transition into industry. I don't think you necessarily have to do that, particularly when you come back out of an investment banking background or consulting background. However, for me at the time, it was a good way to go to business school. I ended up going to Berkeley and use the coursework there to get more exposure of sort of operational issues and do the case studies. And honestly, it was also just a great 2 years of just building relationships. And there's a lot of I think there's a lot of soft skills you kind of learn in business school, presentation skills as well. And that was a good way for me to also get to meet a lot of different people in different industries because I'd been so busy in investment banking. And so at that time, I was really looking at business models, and I actually decided to go into media. So I spent a brief time at Yahoo just to get the big company exposure, and then very quickly really knew that kind of a large company wasn't for me. And since then, I usually enter companies when they're anywhere between 50 to like $100 million revenue. And so, yes, I made a very, very concrete decision that, I wanted to go into media because I just knew it was a better business model. And then when I left IGN, when we finally exited and sold that company, at that time, SaaS software was becoming much more popular and prevalent. And Andreessen did their famous manifesto that software was going to eat the world. And so I saw that and thought that was actually a really good time to sort of pivot into the SaaS industry. And I've been in the SaaS industry since.
We want to find out about Gainsight, but I just want to point out that you joined the company as a VP of finance and back in I guess 2019, and I mentioned that you became CFO officially last year, but you were an interim CFO, and we hear it's the best and the worst at times. But how did it serve you, that interim role, when you stepped into it? What do you think? Is it a path you'd recommend others? What would you tell us?
For me, it's a great question, and I appreciate the question. I think for me, it really was. I think a great middle ground for a while, and the reason is that a CFO is it's a big job, and I've been living it in a very interesting economy in the last 9 months, and so it was a great way to sort of like dip my toes in without the full responsibility as everyone sort of figured out, is this the right fit or not? So I really considered it both ways. They were, I think, certainly, okay, first time CFO. This is sort of, it's a big job. And then on the other hand, I was also sort of saying like, okay, is this the right fit for me or not? And so I think it kind of served both purposes for both parties. So I would recommend it. In a lot of ways, I often wonder, we're not able to just go in and be in the job for a month and really just sort of test it out. And I kind of got that chance as being an interim CFO. Clearly, it was successful, I think, for both parties. And so I was thrilled to sort of make it, official last year.
Good number of our listeners probably are familiar with this company in the customer success realm. We do chat with them about customer success from time to time. But tell us about Gainsight. What is this company about today? What are its offerings?
Yeah, so for the benefits for those that don't know customer success, our company defines customer success as essentially everything post sales. So, we've got a lot of really great popular software. I'm sure your listeners have heard of, Salesforce to sort of track customers in the pre-sales journey. But really, when you think about it, your customers are probably the most important thing in your company. And when our founders started the software company, they realized that there was really no good software that was really managing customers once you have them. And so our customers, it's basically a one-stop shop, and it is, is the one database that houses all your customer information, and it is the group that essentially keeps our customers, the customer success, managers and the entire group, to really ensure that your customers are happy, and so we have a health score, for example, on the software that in one number basically looks at things like time spent, adoption, like all these sorts of metrics, and then rolls it up into one score that you can actually look at and see the health of a customer. It also tracks the customer journey and from onboarding to maturity, making sure that they're hitting all the milestones at the appropriate time, and it's very customized to each customer. And really, at the end of the day, all of this matters because you want to keep your customers, as well as you want to keep them not just happy, but also continuing to grow. At the end of the day, our software is really, the goal is to really increase customer lifetime value, as well as ensure that your gross retention rate, which is sort of one of our North Star metrics, continues to stay high, as well as net retention rate as well. Two very important metrics. All three of them actually very important metrics, as particularly I would say in today's world, when a lot of companies aren't able to grow their new customer base, just given the contraction in the markets and lower budgets. And so the most efficient way to grow your customers or to grow your revenue is really from your current customers. So not only do a lot of companies really focus on their current customers right now, we heard a lot from investors as well. I mean, I just did a bunch of investor conferences, and I had so many investors come say, "Hey, will you guys do your best practices for customer success to our portfolio?" So we're hearing it. This is no longer just a customer success software. It's CEOs are involved, boards are involved as well. And just in terms of like where we are in the industry, we're actually the category creator. And so we have the vast majority in terms of sort of market share. So it's around 75, 80%, depending upon the year.
We always like to ask for an abbreviated history of a company's capital structure, given this is private, and where is it on the funding ladder as far as stage of growth?
Yeah. So we are a little over 10 years old at this point. So it is, and I feel like every really good company takes at least a decade, I mean, we hear these great success stories, but really most companies take at least a decade or more to really get their sort of footing. So we were venture backed originally, and about 2 years ago, in December of 2020, we were actually received a majority investment by Vista Equity Partners. We made the strategic decision, and at that time, we could have gone public. We were certainly big enough, but we actually made the decision to go with Vista Equity Partners because of their operational expertise, for one. And we, in many ways, weren't in a rush, in that we just, we're really in it for the long game. And so it's always interesting, these decisions that, you make, because 2021 came around and we went, oh no, perhaps we made the wrong decision. We should have gone public. And then of course, 2022 came around and we said, oh, we're so grateful. And they've been incredible partners, very supportive of me personally as well in this role. And so we're grateful to be part, of their portfolio. They also, of course, have, they've, as you probably know, they have, about 100, almost nearly 100 billion in assets and portfolio of 80, 90 companies. And we're able to really learn, from all of them. So as the economy has had their, the dips and the highs and the lows, we're very quickly able to access information across the portfolio too. And that's been pretty invaluable, I would say, for me particularly.
So we know, as we mentioned, you stepped into the role last year, the middle of last year, I suppose. Can you tell us a little bit about, as you came on board, what your priorities might have been? What was it that the first order of business for you? It might have been a hire. It might have been adopting some new tools of some sort? I don't know.
Yeah, so I think there were a couple things. I think tools was definitely one. We were kind of in the middle of making some decisions in terms of moving over our ERP, and so that was definitely, I think, very, very high on my list. And so that I think that was one. I think very quickly also the economy sort of changed. So very quickly, we were kind of in a place where we were already in the on the path to efficiency. So, but we also had a fair amount of investments in growth as well. So very quickly, while I was in the position, it was let's actually pull down some of our growth investments and hold on those for a while, and let's pull in some of our efficiency levers that we had already in plan. And we really also in a very very quickly made some decisions around, holding on headcount. We were told by Vista later, we were actually one of the earliest ones in their portfolio to do that, and that ended up being the right decision. So that, I mean, very quickly in the position, that was really the first order of business, because we could see where things were kind of, heading. And so very quickly, finance took a front seat, I would say, in the organization, with me. And so I would say as a third order of business was just honestly continuing to build the relationships, internally. I'd been here, but I'll say that it is very different being officially in the seat versus being interim. There's a little different. It's just a little bit more sort of solid, and people, I think, react to you a little bit differently. So continuing to build those relationships and reminding the rest of the executive team that this was just in our best interests, long term. And I'm thrilled to have done it, because it did sort of help us, and we haven't had to take any really big actions because of it, because we were very prudent in very early on.
It's interesting because your timing is, as you explained, you arrive and there's sort of this shift happening from the pursuit of growth to the pursuit of profitable growth. And one would imagine that there was a set of numbers and metrics that the team had been looking at for growth. Let's stay on the path. Let's stay on the path. And then there had to be this gear change. Anything you can share on that in terms of, was there a particular metric or way of educating the rest of the organization for that journey?
Yeah, and again, luckily, because we were with Vista, we were already on that path. So I wouldn't say it was a huge shift for us in terms of educating the organization. And we tend to be pretty transparent. And I actually do a monthly newsletter to the org, and I talk about our metrics and like where we're heading. And particularly in this sort of economy, I also do things like I do CFO's office hours where people can come and ask me questions. That education is something that's becoming a little bit more important for us. But in terms of specific metrics, we, our North Star, I would say, is, rule of X. And so for your listeners, if they're not familiar with it, it's to put at a very simple level, because there's different formulas. It's essentially top line growth and a profitability percentage margin, and you add up those percentages, and you would like to get to at least a 40. And so we are on the path to getting to rule of 40. But we have certain targets for, we've been with Vista now for year 2. So, and we want to constantly be improving. And actually our goal eventually is to get to, rule of 50, a couple years out. And so even though the markets turned very quickly, we knew that was still where we wanted to be. And so we use that as sort of a goalpost in terms of, making our decisions. And really it was like we saw that top line was going to be dropping. And so, what do we need to do for our expenses so that we still really hit those goals? And, it's an interesting metric because, there's a lot of variety in it. So you can have 40% top line growth and 0% profitability. You could have 60% top line growth and have negative profitability. I definitely keep a pulse on sort of what the investment community is asking for. And what they are asking, as you sort of alluded to, is that you get to profitability, ideally within, the next, year, you've got clear line of sight. And so, we will be able to get to that, which has been, a great financial story for us. We're really proud of that too, in that journey.
Given the size this company is, I think it would be interesting to get some perspective on Silicon Valley Bank and all of what unfolded a few weeks back.
I think we've all learned from SVB, just whether we had exposure or we didn't. And so I think some of the lessons I think that we're going to take from it is I think that it's important for every company to be pretty diversified in their key vendor relationships, and banking sort of being one of them. And I think that, being really very clear on sort of cash needs, particularly sort of internationally, and having easier access to those reserves, I think will also be important, as well as, having in place things like, line of credits as well. So I think we're just going to see a lot of companies get a lot more clear about like sort of what their cash strategy is. And I think we're going to see a lot of investors having sort of best practices and getting more involved in that part of the business where perhaps they've been a little bit more hands off.
Often we'll ask finance leaders about customer success and how they sort of collaborate with the customer success team and the sales team. And I'm always curious, who's around the table? How does that all happen? Who is sort of leading it? And everyone in finance is, oh no, we collaborate, and sales collaborates. I'm curious about this organization, just as you described, it's sort of the founder of the space. Was it organized the way you had imagined, given the all the brain power that's gone into creating this software and helping illuminate the customer success opportunity and how it kind of unifies the organization?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. And I would say, the function of customer success also continues to evolve. So I would say, I've been at Gainsight, it'll be 4 years in May. And I would say when I started, it was still very much there's this function called customer success, and everything is in all, that's their main focus. I would say now we really believe, and I think we're the best examples of it. Customer success is is important for everyone in the company to be involved in. So the interesting thing is that yes, our software right now is still primarily used by customer success teams. However, there's really a touch point for every exec. So for the CFO, that we have a renewal engine. So for renewal accuracy, CFOs can go in there. ROs, chief revenue officers, can go in there for expansion pipeline. Chief marketing officers can go in there and for advocacy and for community, because we've got a product there. And so, I think over time you're going to see more, more of the org really look. I mean, because this is basically the customer, the one place for like all the customer records for the entire company. And I'll tell you, for example, in this economy, I'm getting pulled into a ton of customer calls, as well as, sales calls as well. So I'm in the software too. And I go to investor conferences, and there'll be, for example, I'll see customers, and it's a great tool for me to just kind of go in, see where a customer is at, and then have a really intelligent conversation. So I think, it has use across the board.
The Net Promoter Score, is that something that complements what you're up to? Do you use it internally?
We actually do we track NPS in our software. So that is like one of the major metrics that gets tracked and then ends up getting rolled up to like health scores as well. So we do that. You can also do like survey data through our Gainsight as well. So yeah, these are some of the things that we absolutely track for sure.
We'd like to touch on with you the impact of AI. But as a finance leader, as you look at the different functions within the company, what's going to be impacted? Where do you see the impact likely happening? And not just to finance. We know that the hiring process and staffing models are changing as well as AI gets adopted and helps those functions to evolve.
Yeah, look, as a finance person, I look at it very similar, like all investments. I think it's very important. AI is sort of, the type of thing where it's the overnight success that's actually been going on for about 10 years now also, and now we're hearing a lot about it. And I think now we have to see sort of like it practically, where can we really use AI to sort of extract value? Sometimes, I tell my employees and my team that that sometimes we forget, really at the end of the day, our goal is, we are creating value for investors, at the end of the day. And then of course we want, we have this idea of success for all. So investor success, employee success, and customer success. But really, at the end of the day, that's a function of our company. So we're certainly looking at AI for different areas. I think probably the first one is going to be for self-service, to allow our customers to do some sort of self-service and make it sort of easier. And that's, I think, how we're going to be looking at it. What's the ROI of investing in AI here versus, putting many more heads onto this sort of project. So I do think very important, and we're certainly looking and talking to also and understanding the market and what companies are out there and what are they doing versus what we can develop internally. I do think in practice it will, I think for a lot of companies, take a little bit of time. But we're definitely on it and watching it very closely.
And again, just to circle back to talent, do you have, again, having landed there just prior COVID, and like every organization's been through the couple of years where it was such an unusual environment to operate a business and hire people, has your talent mindset evolved to some level? And what is your talent mindset as a finance leader today in terms of the role finance plays when it comes to human capital?
Great question. So, a couple things. You're right. COVID really changed a lot for people. And of course, people went from work from home. Now, we were a lot of hybrid. Now, a lot of tech companies are asking employees to come back. We, for example, made the decision to be primarily work from home, except in India, where there are some cultural differences. So we continue to have offices there. And, a lot of people sort of have, doubted that idea, particularly now as people are going back to offices, and particularly around culture. Every company talks a lot about culture. We are no different. It's very, very important to us. But I'll say, we actually won the number one spot on LinkedIn's Glassdoor's best places to work this year. And so the fun headline was on the San Francisco Chronicle that this obscure company called Gainsight beat, Meta and all these Google and all these big companies. And we were laughing that, we've never been so proud to be this obscure company. We don't think we're that obscure. We had, 3,000 people at our conference last year in Moscone Center up in San Francisco, but, we had a little fun with it. And I think that, we have been able to maintain our culture and still have a little fun, even despite the intensity, despite the economy. We certainly, even as we've got this part of our mission statement is that we want to win business by being human first. So we have this concept called human first leadership. And it is a big, big part of our culture. And I actually recently wrote an article on Forbes and talking about human first finance. So as a finance leader, I've really embraced that because I know it is our most precious capital in any software company. It is also our biggest cost. So like with everything, the better culture we can have, the more that people really enjoy being here. I really actually believe at the end of the day, will contribute to the company and contribute to efficiency and contribute to the mission. So I actually really have embraced it, and I think it's I think the whole idea and concept has done very well for Gainsight, and we hope that other companies will follow.
Well, we're up to our finance strategic moment question, and this is where we ask our signature question. We're just looking for a moment of insight that you've had along the way. Just one. You've had many of these, we know, but wondering if you'd share one where you reveal how finance plays a strategic role in business. What would come to mind for you?
So, finance is in a very unique position because we are probably the only department that actually is sitting across all the others. And we're deep into the numbers as well. So we often own the data because we're owning the budget. We're also often owning the metrics. And because of that, we're sort of uniquely positioned where we can look across the organization and really see what's sort of needed and what's sort of important. As such, more and more finance, before it used to just be the number crunchers. Now it is very much a strategic position and strategic department. So I think, one of the biggest one, was essentially at Gainsight when we had to sort of make a decision where, how were we going to expand? Were we going to, we're mostly in the enterprise space. And there were a lot of ways to expand. We could have gone, this was, very early when I was at Gainsight. We could go to SMB, for example, small business, we could do that. We could partner with, someone larger and go that route. Or we could expand horizontally and grow that way. There's different ways to grow. And so really it required a really broad analysis of, let's look at the TAM of every one of these options. Let's look at the longer term. When I think longer term growth rate, not just what's going to happen in the next year, but what's really the 3 to 5 year sort of growth potential for all these. And then you're also just looking at some industry analysis of where are people, current software companies really getting valued, and why are they getting valued for what they're getting valued. So it was looking at all this type of large sort of analysis, and where we ended up landing is that it was that the companies that actually had a platform and horizontal platform were actually getting valued the most, and that was probably also going to increase our TAM the most. So we ended up making the decision to actually expand in that way. So we ended up buying a company called PX, which is a product experience product that sits very nicely with customer success, because that is the one that's actually our biggest competitor is Pendo, but that is our product that looks at the product metrics like adoption and like time spent. About a year and a half ago, we bought a company out of the Netherlands called Insighted, and that's our community platform. Why community? Because if you can get all your customers together in a community, the product ends up being a lot stickier. And there's also this sort of self-service piece to it, where if there's an issue, then customers kind of get together, can talk through it, and kind of come up with solutions. You also have a really strong pulse on what your customers are wanting once you get them talking together. So it, I think, also helps build the roadmap for the future. So now we're not, yes, we are the customer record, the official customer record for a company, but really we want to own the entire post-sales sort of journey. And that whole customer life cycle is really what we want to own. And I think that ended up being the right decision, because that, especially like right now, when you're looking at your customer, when you're trying to sell into your customer base, we now have more products to sell into our customer base and really bring to them a suite of products versus just, a one solution.
So we can expect some more additions to the suite.
Yes, no, there are. So there's a lot of things we continue to look at. A lot of different categories. There's customer education, there's onboarding, there's value engineering. And so we continue to sort of keep in a pulse, and, some more certainly. And, part of the analysis is, how much of this do we develop internally? I suspect we'll continue to be, acquisitive as well. So no, we are continuing. It's something that we constantly talk about in our strategy sessions.
Hello and welcome to 60-second stories from CFO Thought Leader. Back in 2013, Stephen Mitchell had been working only a few months for Irish telecom giant Eircom, when an enticing job offer upended his weekly commute from the United Kingdom to Dublin. It seems Eircom's CFO was prepared to appoint Mitchell corporate finance director. It was an appointment that would require Mitchell to oversee the company's investor relations, treasury, merger, and capex functions. However, that was not all. Mitchell's appointment came just as Eircom was making the business case to roll out a 4G network across Ireland. Besides his new functional responsibilities, it was clear Mitchell was now expected to rally his finance team and bring forth the financial insights required to move forward the business case for 4G. That story and much more on episode number 864 featuring Stephen Mitchell, CFO of Redgate Software. Remember, the future of finance is listening.
All right, well, we're going to jump to our mentoring round where we're going to ask you to look back once again. We were curious about your first, and again, you were in an interim role, which we touched on with you earlier, but we're really curious about your first 30 days when you were the CFO. The first 30 days, we always like to ask about. If you could go back in time and just give yourself one piece of advice, what would it be?
One piece is very hard, but I'll try it. I think I would just say, you've got this. I mean, there were a lot of, I would say, just nerves officially sort of being in the seat. I'm going to sneak in another one, which is not everything needs to be done in the first 30 days, because I'm the type of person that wants everything done, yesterday. And so, certainly pace myself a little bit. But I think, I was ready. I was certainly sort of prepared. I was very fortunate. I had a lot of support. But sometimes that voice in your head still says certain things to you. And so, I think that, I would have been nice if I could have just relaxed a little bit more, and enjoyed it. But that being said, I'm was very grateful for the opportunity and just, wanted to do my best and do well by the company, by the investors, and by my team. And I think, 9 months in, I think everyone would say it's been a pretty successful partnership across the board.
Alka, we always like to ask our guests to reflect a little bit on the personal side. We're wondering if you have a personal habit or part of a daily routine that sets you apart maybe from others. You're known for it. Anything come to mind? People, it might be something a family member would point out to us, and that's just how she does it. That's always been what she looks at life. Don't know. Anything come to mind?
It's a great question. I love it. So I've been an active meditator now for about 20 years. Before all these amazing apps, and they're great. But I've been a student for some time and went and tried to find essentially the masters that were doing this really well, because I saw the value of it. And so that is a habit that I've continued to sort of maintain. And, I think what most people will sort of say about me, at work, is that I have this sort of calm demeanor, and I really sort of owe it to the meditation. And luckily it's a habit that's very cumulative. But I think particularly in sort of these times, it allows me to deal with not just high stress situations, but allows me to often see the bigger picture of things, And so, and I think that's been really helpful. And then I'm able to communicate that out as well. So that, I would say, is the number one, I think, most important, habit.
Very interesting. It's we can turn back the clock and go back 4 years ago. I think we might have had one CFO a year tell us that they meditate. But since COVID, and I would say in the last 6 months, we've had several mentioning meditation. And over the last year, I would say we've had more than we had in the first 6 years. So interesting.
Yeah, I'm probably one of the few CFOs that have actually led a meditation exercise for the entire company, which I did, I think, about like 2 years ago. But yeah, it's been a huge passion of mine for some time. I've my father, I was able to really see as he developed his practice, like how it helped him. when I was a young person. So I'm so glad that many more leaders are doing it and making it a priority, because I think it is super important.
And talking about it, which I think is great for others to learn. We always like to ask if you have a book recommendation for us. It doesn't have to be a business book. Might be something you escape with.
Ooh, that's a good one. I'm gonna actually pick Untethered Soul, since we're just talking about meditation. And I think it's a brilliant book. I've given it to a couple people, and especially I think if you're very analytical, I think it's a really great book. And the interesting thing is, if you get to know the author, who I actually went and met and spent some time with, he actually started a software company in the 90s. And often says he didn't really think it was his path. It had to do with customer health records. And then I think in the 90s ended up selling it for like $1 billion. So, imagine now would have, really large transaction back then. And he was also a professor and very much into meditation and spirituality. And he has, he's got 2 books, but Untethered Soul, he just has a really great description of how the mind works in a way that I have just never seen and read. I read a lot of psychology books as well. And so I would say that's actually just a really great book to really just understand yourself better and how sort of the mind works. And I'm a big believer that, the more self-aware one can get, it helps not just your own mind state, but then, it helps work. It helps kind of like all these different facets of your life. So that's my pick.
Excellent. Thank you for that. And we are up to our final question, where we're going to ask you to look forward finally. We're interested in your priorities as CFO of Gainsight over the next 12 months. What would those be?
So I think the biggest one is, we've now locked down our plan. So we have a path to profitability. And so continuing to maintain that path while ensuring we're still capturing all the growth that's out there. And I think that's and continuing to keep an eye on that mix is for me the number one goal. And then I would also add to that is that, continuing to ensure that not only does our TAM grow, but that we can maintain our competitive positioning. Because, the one thing about success is, when you become a successful company, is that you do have a lot of entrants. And that's especially in the environment of a lot of what people are calling essentially free money. We did have a lot of sort of entrants in the small and that sort of SMB part of our business. And we now have a product for that as well. But just really keeping an eye on that, because I think as we've seen in the last couple of months, things just move really, really fast. So those are the 2 that I would say are my biggest priority. And 3, I always want to have a little fun while we're all doing this work as well. So I'll keep that, to maintain our culture and, have a little lightheartedness as well as we're kind of working is also very, very important to me. So.
Alka Tandan, thank you for joining us on CFO Thought Leader.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a blast.
Hello, Thought Leader listeners. As you have perhaps already heard or even seen, we're now featuring the career lessons and moments of strategic insight shared by our CFO guests as Thought Leader videos. You can now find these videos on our blog at cfothoughtleader.com and, of course, our newsletters, but also on LinkedIn. If you haven't already, please go ahead and follow our CFO Thought Leader LinkedIn company page, and you'll be certain not to miss a single Thought Leader video debut. CFO Thought Leader, the #1 thought leadership platform exclusively for and by CFOs. As always, thank you for listening.